going to regret this.
Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Hi, this is Nick Anastasiou, story editor on Star Wars The Clone Wars and Star Wars Bad Batch. And you are listening to Aggressive Negotiations.
We're back with the regular crew here on Aggressive Negotiations, the Star Wars podcast that prides itself on all of the topics that we explore here in a galaxy far, far away. I am one of your hosts, the humble Jedi Master John Mills, and joining me on this fine podcast, reunited, and it feels so good, is my dear friend, Jedi Master Matthew Rushing. Matt, welcome back. We kept your seat warm, and the coordinates are punched in. Are you ready to get underway with this new episode of Aggressive Negotiations?
I am. We have put Master Riddell on probation for his unorthodox views on the special editions. He is being punished by having to do a survey mission on a planet about whether or not there is a vergence in the Force. Whether he comes back from that planet is sus because, there seems to be some sort of dark side user and or Sith that nobody should know about on the loose. So if we never see Master Riddell again, we know why.
I've already dispatched the rescue mission, and Master Riddell's going to come back just fine. Trust me. I know how to use my lightsaber whip and get people out of trouble. So,
because you got them into trouble. Yeah. Oh man. Whew, goodness.
So, hey, listen, I'm just going to say bald people get a bad rap here. Okay. All right. Like that. You got Mace Windu toying with the dark side when he's about to take it. And then you got green people with lightsaber whips. Come on. I need a hero, as Bonnie Tyler's saying. But, of course, more than heroes, we need an expression of your love. Go over to Apple Podcasts and go ahead and drop off a 5-star rating and review. Yeah, I went ahead and asked for the 5-star because I think we're a 5-star. Come on and give us that review. We'd love it. We'd appreciate it. And, of course, you can find us on social media at the Jedi Masters on X and at Join Nerd Party as the network on X and the Nerd Party on Facebook and Instagram. So, Master Rushing, while you were away on your own expeditionary mission, I was thinking to myself, I said to myself, one of the things that I don't know that we've explored really in depth is about Omega from one specific angle. We know now that Bad Batch is closed out, so this doesn't count as a spoiler because everybody should have watched season 3 by this point, that she can be a conduit for midichlorians, for the Force. And they did something special to ensure that about her. However, she is supposedly minimally manipulated material from Jango Fett.
Right.
So the first implication I want to talk about is, given her Force affinities, does it carry any implication for Boba Fett? And are we looking at Omega and Boba are that sort of dyad, though it was created in a lab? They're sort of a forced dyad because they're flip sides of the same coin. And this special Force sort of manipulation that goes on with Omega, does that imply something about the genetic material that they both come from, that there's some sort of Force latency in both of them?
I think that's a really good question that I had never really considered, whether or not, Boba Fett also has any of those tendencies. And I think my first reaction would be no. Otherwise, Omega would not have been necessary, possibly, for them to create. I mean, the name itself implies that she is the last one to have been created and seems to be the only one that has this ability. Like, if there was an alpha and she's the Omega, then this process of elimination of trying to create a Force sensitivity in a test tube baby, right, only found its culmination in her. And so therefore, somebody like Boba Fett, who was unaltered as a clone, would not have that. That's where I would kind of think of going with that question just immediately.
Okay, the one counter I'd give to that is if we take it to Jango, if Omega is Omega and we're saying Alpha and Omega, wouldn't Jango be the Alpha? I mean, we don't know a whole lot about how Jango was specifically selected, but isn't it
Right,
therefore
exactly.
possible that maybe even with the guidance of the Kaminoans, Dooku selected Jango not just for the ulterior Death Watch, Mandalorian purposes, but because there was a latent force sensitivity in Jango that he knew they would be able to manipulate. I mean, I'm just saying that the possibilities here are that, number one, Boba's walking around unknowingly sensitive, and it's because his father had a sensitivity that he never explored or was unaware of himself. And that's why Omega becomes a possibility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think, if I remember correctly, George has mentioned that everybody, of course, has a connection with the Force because it's a part of everything. And there is a sense that then anybody could train in Force sensitivity and become more Force sensitive, but the true ability to connect in the deepest way that we see somebody like Jedi or dark side users or anyone else really comes from the fact of also the other hallmark of the midichlorians connecting you even more so with the Force. And so I think, the fact that, possibly Jango himself having a stronger but not off the charts midichlorian counts or enough that it would make that worth exploring then as a basis is interesting. But I almost always wonder too if this project, because we know that the clones were being made 10 years before,
Yes,
or so, pretty much right after the Phantom Menace.
Yes.
And so the process hasn't been going on for a long time. I'm guessing that they chose Jango Fett specifically because of his constitution as a Mandalorian and the way they could manipulate that. And it wasn't, I don't think, even fully revealed to anybody else that the super secret work that they're doing. And I'm always I'm on the timeline of it. I'm wondering, so did the super secret experiments that Palpatine kind of initiates after he's elected Chancellor become an offshoot of that, and that's the starting material? And is there a connection at all? That's a question I kind of wonder a little bit because I like where we're going with this, but I also just wonder too if as overarching as Palpatine is with everything, there's also some things that aren't just in his control completely.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So.
I mean, the biggest counter argument about Jango having, a larger than average person's midichlorian count, of course, is the clone army itself.
Right.
Like that, it's always been openly acknowledged that it would be, whether you go back to Timothy Zahn's books in the early 90s or anywhere else, it's always been openly acknowledged that cloning midichlorians is an incredibly difficult thing, and that's what makes Omega so special. So in a sense, I feel like I'm arguing against the very premise here. I suppose probably a refinement of the thought then is Omega, and Fett undoubtedly goes down a dark path through his life, but I guess maybe it's one of those things where dyad's too big a word for it, but Omega is of the light. She's very clearly of the light even before she meets the Batch. And they both are good for each other. The Batch is good for her. She's good for the Batch. And you can tell Omega is a good person from the beginning. And Boba it's stacked against him because he's raised by a guy who's an amoral mercenary, and
Right.
that it puts him on a path of darkness. So maybe I'm just more reacting to the fact that even when science is getting involved like this, the Force steps in and makes sure there's a light and a dark, between the two of them, that there's going to be a balance between the two.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing there too, as you were talking, I was also thinking that, one of the people that is incredibly important in Omega's life and raising as a child is Lama Su.
Mm-hmm.
And she treats Omega very well. And she seems to really care about Omega, especially when she realizes what they're trying to do with Omega and the implications then of that.
Yeah.
And I think that's really interesting there because it's like you were talking about, you have Jango Fett being raised by this kind of amoral bounty hunter who is just a guy trying to make his way in the universe, whatever that takes. And then you have this scientist who has helped create this child, feels very much responsible for her, and is in the end willing to give her life for her, and has worked to protect her even when she was on Camino. And so there's an amount of love there that I don't think Boba necessarily ever completely gets, because in some ways too, I think Jango's raising of Boba always also seems to be incredibly self-serving, almost a celebration of himself more than necessarily like true love, because it's also not really a son. It's like you're just trying to raise another you, which is feels like almost an incredibly selfish, narcissistic type of thing to do. Whereas again, you have the juxtaposition with Omega, where it's like, yes, the scientists created them in a laboratory and didn't care about them at all until they realized the uniqueness and incredibleness of what they had created, and then it becomes the thing to which they spend the rest of their life trying to protect, which is a very different type of upbringing. So, like you were talking about, is it one of those places where, the Force kind of steps in to protect her? Because if it doesn't, what happens with Palpatine? I mean, he's going to get what he wants, and we know the ultimate end game of what he wants, which is terrible.
The thing is, going with this nurturing concept, I think that it very much plays into what Lucas is showing, especially in Attack of the Clones, but I mean throughout the entire original 6 movies and everything, is yes, he's playing with ideas of found family, but very specifically, Attack of the Clones has a lot to do with father figures. And
yes,
Jango is a reflection of the dad who just wants a son who's just like him, which we know from his own personal life Lucas dealt with. Then you have Obi-Wan as the father trying to be friend. He's trying to be a mentor, but he also wants to be his buddy. And the tricks inherent with that, and that I think you could even cast as sort of like a Francis Ford Coppola in Lucas's life sort of thing.
Yeah.
But bringing Omega into the mix, she then winds up having father figures come in, and that winds up being a very interesting exploration of the dad who didn't expect to be a dad with an adopted kid, which of course Lucas is an adoptive father as well. Trying to figure out how, okay, we're family, but not a traditional type of family. So, how do we get through this and play to each other's strengths? I think that would be, I think, a really interesting sort of thing, because even taking the Force stuff out of it, you see, to your point, how Omega starts off her life, and then when the Bad Batch comes in, she starts off with a lot of love and protection. Whereas Boba Fett already knows how to fly a ship and plan things with his dad and has a solitary life.
Try to murder a Jedi,
all of that.
Just
sort of,
a normal Tuesday.
And then, of course, there's the trauma of seeing your own father have his head cut off by a
True.
Jedi.
Yeah.
You know, that's got to leave a psychological mark, I would imagine.
Yes.
So it's one of those things where I think that's probably more interesting than trying to tease out any sort of like, does Boba have latent force abilities or, sort of thing, because of the fact that I think the Kaminoans would have been very smart, and they would not have made such a tactically questionable move or strategically questionable move as to give Jango Fett a son who had any force ability. Like,
Right.
if anything,
exactly.
I think that they would make extra special sure that as many midichlorians as possible removed from Jango Fett's, son clone, as it were. Maybe they took them all out and they put them all into Omega or something like that.
No, I do. I really like the way that you kind of broke that down, because I think that, as we have looked at Star Wars for so long together, and one of the Lucasian hallmarks of Star Wars is father relationships.
Mhm.
Because of course, like Spielberg dealing with his parents' divorce, and he's been doing it for like the last 40 years in film,
Mhm.
Lucas has been working out this idea of what fatherhood is in many different forms, from his own father to him being a father, right?
Mhm.
And I think that that's actually incredibly beautiful, because one, nobody has done it as well, because most people treat fathers like either unnecessary, or they treat them as if they're idiots. And very few of them actually want to deal with the ramifications of how important fathers are to the lives of their children, and the impact that they can have in all of these different types of areas, which I think is incredibly cool. And so, when you talked about the idea that, okay, so what we're exploring then in the character of Omega is the opposite of what Boba Fett is to Jango Fett, which is, that's kind of like an adoptive kid kind of thing, but in a very warped and kind of creepy way, right?
Mhm.
Whereas Omega truly is this child who gets adopted by these clones who had no desire to be a parent, and get this person thrust into their life that they then can't not care for, that they grow to love in a way that they never expected even a possibility for them as clones, as
Which,
people.
which even, when you think about the fact that they're all, I mean, every character that we're talking about is cloned from Jango Fett. Like that you could even
Yes.
get into like a
Yep.
super weird
Yeah.
philosophical sort of thing where it's like, it's all of the aspects of Fett. But like, while we're sitting here talking and you talk about, we're talking about how even Boba is quasi adopted, sort of thing. There's a story for somebody to write. And I mean this sincerely. I'm not saying this is a joke. I would love to know, did Jango Fett hold Boba as an infant? Did he take him around on his hip? Not exactly the way that Mando takes Grogu, but was Boba Fett carried around? Like, I would love to see, because we're talking about Jango's motivations for having a child are, kind of selfish. The way he approaches being a father is kind of selfish. Well, straight up selfish. But there's still the seed of he wanted a child. So there had to be some semblance of love for that child in there. We might not like the way he expresses it. I would actually love to see some sort of story about Boba Fett as a very young child, infant and toddler. How involved was Jango? Was Jango training him to
Yeah.
be a survivalist from the beginning? Did he leave him at Kaminoan daycare, and he was like, "I'll be back in a little." Like, how involved was he with Boba from the beginning?
Yeah,
Because
a good
Boba's very
question.
dedicated to his dad.
Yep. Yeah, I think I think the interesting thing about that to me is that there's probably just this kind of warped sense of loyalty and kind of I would say probably a warped sense of love there, right? And not the type of love that we would want to champion, or and I think that's again the thing that makes um the raising of these two people so interesting. And we do really go, I think we really do come to see in the ways in which Lucas has also struggled with the idea of nature versus nurture in discussion. I mean, I think one of the things that we've talked about before, and I talked about it on another podcast before as well, is like, you think about the way in which Luke has a completely different upbringing than Anakin, and yet Luke, for all of his frustrations with his aunt and uncle, they clearly love him.
Yeah.
And they have clearly treated him very well. And as hard as his uncle can kind of be on him, he's doing it from a place of wanting to protect Luke, because he also knows what happened to Anakin, who became Vader. He knows that. And so again, there's love there. And I think there's just something really beautiful about the way these Lucasian stories have shown how family can be in all of these different interesting ways, but all, I guess the Tolstoy line, all good families are the same. It's truly about the way in which kids are loved by the people who take care of them, and if they are really loved by those people, and that those people are willing to, sacrificially love those kids, it makes a big difference. And, I think that's the really interesting thing, because I would say that when I look at the relationship between, Anakin and Obi-Wan, I think the biggest thing for me there, it's not that he doesn't love Anakin, but he's just not quite ready to be in that position yet. And
Right.
he's not, I don't know if he truly is able to do the same thing that those clones are able to do for Omega, which is just accept the role that Anakin needed him to play, which was father and not brother.
Well, I think you hit on something right there, and I was thinking about it while you were talking, is like the clones do self-separate out into bands of brothers, and they refer to each other as brother. And I think the Batch has a very family type of feel to them, because they are unique within the group. They're strange. The other clones regard them as odd. They, and they don't even really want to interact with them the way they would other clones of the line, as it were. But, going through with that whole thing, I like what you hit on with Obi-Wan there, because you're absolutely right, of course. Like, and I think we've gone back and forth about this before, where it's like,
Sure, yeah.
Obi-Wan definitely wasn't ready, and Obi-Wan wants to be a brother.
Yeah.
And it's like, Anakin and Obi-Wan, their relationship is much more like the Bad Batch's relationship with each other.
Yes. Yeah.
But even the Batch had Hunter. So it's like there's this thing where it's just like, wow, you know what? Actually, my brain just bent around this idea that the dynamic between Anakin and Obi-Wan is very similar in a way to the one between Hunter and Crosshair.
I can see that. That's a great point, actually, I think.
Ooh, I hadn't even thought about that till then. Maybe that is why we both love Crosshair and Hunter Crosshair so much. I mean, that's not that wouldn't be the only reason.
Right.
Crosshair,
right, exactly.
His arcs were amazing.
I think it's a great pull. And this is the other, I think, incredibly interesting thing just about the Omega relationship with the clones, right? Is that one of the things that ends up happening then is that they each play a father type role in her life.
Yeah.
Except for Wrecker, who is really more like her brother.
Oh, hands down.
And so, but that's the interesting thing, is that she gets the opportunity to be able to have both, right? She gets the father figures that she needs in the other clones, but then she also gets the brother figure that she needs in Wrecker. And that's, I think, the beauty of that. And again, like, I think that's one of the things to which, you know, Obi-Wan could have gotten there with Anakin if he had realized that, and I think was just even ready emotionally to be the father figure, but he just wasn't there emotionally either. I think that's possibly one of the reasons why, you know, you get Yoda not wanting this to be a thing, because he doesn't, I think he just senses that what Anakin needs and what Obi-Wan is at that moment is just not the right fit. But what's he gonna do, you know? And it's also one of those things where I think it's you can kind of begin to see that the Jedi failing there is not willing to bend when needed. They had become too brittle with the rules, and that's kind of what leads us into the place that we end up in. And so, but yeah, I think I love that you just brought up this whole idea with Omega, because I do think it's incredibly interesting. And it really just goes to show the way in which Star Wars has continued to, when it's at its best, it's continuing to talk about the main thematic elements that have run through the entire series, and do it in a way that is fresh and new. And you realize, like, George had nothing to do with the creation of the Bad Batch, but I think George would love it because those that created the Bad Batch truly understand the mind of George Lucas, the way he thinks, and that's what makes that show feel so ingrained in us. And in fact, I think it's one of the reasons we all gravitated towards The Mandalorian, because that's also the same story, right? It's an accidental father. Like, he wasn't planning on being a dad. That was the last thing on his mind, you know? And both of those stories then play out in somewhat similar fashions, but also different, and give us that aspect of fatherhood that, you know, Star Wars hadn't really talked about as much.
And I think that something that we were talking about a second ago tees us up for another very interesting question that I will ask next time on Aggressive Negotiations. But if anybody wants to talk to you more about Omega and the Bad Batch, where can they find you out there in the wilds of the galaxy far, far away, or as we like to call it, the internet?
Yeah. Well, I'm all over social media under the name MattRushing02. Of course, you can find me here on the network with a completed show called Owl Post about every single chapter of the Harry Potter series. You can also find me on the TFM network doing a bunch of shows. The 602 Club is the main show there, plus a bunch of others about Star Trek that I hope you'll check out. But John, you know, if people wanted to see, you know, what's going on with you and what Bad Batch fashion you may be sporting that day, where can people find you?
Well, bald head is always in fashion, and me and Wrecker love to wear that fashion. And of course, you can find me as Kessel Junkie out there in the wild space of the internet. And you can find me right here on the network co-hosting a delightful show called House Lights, where we look at the work of directors with Tristan Riddell and Darren Moser. But while people continue to process this and get ready for our new topic next week, Matt, I hear the call of bantha steaks at the temple, so I think it's time to close these negotiations.
Negotiations are closed.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.